Evan called me a nobody over oysters on October 6th, and I pretended the waiter's tray was louder than his mouth. 2 tables over, a couple clinked champagne like wind chimes, at ours in a River North place that spelled oysters with a hyphen and a price like a dare. My daughter's fiancé put his hand on her wrist as if her pulse belonged to him. Then his father walked in late, silver hair, silver cuff links, and froze when he saw me. His fork slipped. For a breath, the whole room seemed to hear it. The violinist missed a note. The couple stopped mid-clink, and even the waiter's shoes stuttered on the polished floor. That's the sound I'll remember. Silver on stoneware. The note of a man recognizing a problem. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. I don't need menus with French words to tell me I don't fit in. I measure rooms by trim and sightline, by how a door sits in a frame. I measure men by whether they look you in the eye when they shake your hand. Evan barely glanced at me when he squeezed into the leather booth beside my daughter Maya and ordered for her without asking. She'll have the halibut, she loved it last time, like he knew her better than I did. I watched the water glass sweat in my hand and listened to the server recite the specials, as if delivering a sermon no one asked for. "Dad," Maya said softly, "the ring is even nicer in this light." She lifted her left hand and the stone blinked hard, a white star. Later I'd learned the appraisal said $23,900, but in that moment it felt heavier than money, like a weight tied to her. "It is nice," I said. "What are the plans?" "Winitka," Evan said, pronouncing it the way a realtor does when he steps selling you the driveway. "Thanksgiving week, maybe. My family will handle deposits." Richard, his father, smiled a practiced smile and set a leather folio on the table. When he finally touched my hand, he didn't squeeze, he measured. "Good to finally meet," he said. His eyes did the math on my jacket and my work-rough hands and came up with a number he didn't like. He'd seen me before, 10 years ago, in a different office with a different name on the door, when my invoices hit his shell company and disappeared like rain into sand. "How's Sep's business?" he asked. "It pays the mortgage," I said. "The bungalow?" He knew where I lived. Of course he did. Maya talked about flower colors, December light, and whether the church near Evan's mother's house was too big for who we are. Evan ordered a second bottle without asking the table. He was good-looking in the way that looks great on real estate signs. Clean jaw, practiced half-smile, the tilt of a man who thinks mirrors are honest. When the oysters hit the table, the server hovered, and that sips when Evan leaned toward Richard and said, just loud enough to be heard if you were the kind of person who always hears what hurts. Dawn sipped, worry. He sips not a factor. The server pretended to polish the spoon. My heart pretended it was a nail gun at full blast. Maya didn't hear it, and if she did, she pushed it down where daughters put tiny betrayals to keep the dinner sweet. I looked at the lemon wedge in my hand and wanted to crush it until the rind split. "Dad," Maya said, "Evan Sests found a venue with a long aisle like Mom liked." I swallowed the rind taste and nodded. "Amara, my wife, liked church aisles that gave you time to think before you said forever." We were 2 paychecks into saving for Maya's college when the Whitford job went wrong in 2015. 4 floors framed, 3 change orders, 1 end-of-month scramble. $2,800. I can still feel that number in my chest sat on the corner of the counter in red ink, an emergency bill that wouldn't wait. We raided the college fund to float the crew and told ourselves we'd put it back as soon as the check cleared. The check never cleared. The Shell LLC dissolved. The partner moved to Florida. We stopped saying college fund out loud. The words hurt. Coffee came in cups too small to hold anything like comfort. Evan tapped his ring finger against the stem. "We still talk prenups," he said cheerfully, "just to keep Maya protected." "Whose protection?" I asked, as mildly as if I were asking about salt. "Ours," he said, smiling. He meant it like a joke. He meant it like a line you don't cross. Richard flipped the folio open with 2 fingers and slid a sheet toward Evan, numbers in tidy columns. He kept glancing at me and failing to look all the way. When he finally did, just for a moment, there it was. Recognition sharpening into calculation. He knew exactly who I was because the past doesn't die. It sits in file boxes with dog-eared tabs waiting for the next man to pretend he's smarter than paper. After dessert, the server parked the check at the end of the table like a little black hearse. Evan reached for it. Richard stopped him with a touch, and I relaxed when Maya didn't grab for her purse. "We've got it," Richard said, loud enough for me to hear my name and what he didn't say. Outside, River North smelled like cold and money. Neon caught in a puddle. Maya hugged me with her chin on my shoulder the way she had when she was 9, when we were building a birdhouse and I bent the nails more than I set them. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm something proud of you," I said. Which was true and not the answer. "Call me when you get home." Evan shook my hand with 2 quick pumps and a smile that said we were on the same team because he'd decided there was only one team. "We'll take good care of her," he said. "Take care of the paperwork," I said back. His smile flickered. Richard hung back. The doorman whistled for a car that was already there. "Can we speak sometime soon?" Richard asked, the syllables smooth as river stones. "Just the 2 of us. Clear the air." "Air Sipsa's pretty clear," I said. "We can talk anyway." At home in my Jefferson Park bungalow, the schlag lock turned with a click I'd recognize blindfolded. I set my keys in the dent they've made in the entry table and stood in my kitchen in work boots and the jacket that still held the smell of someone else's food. "Houses talk if you listen." Mine said, "Sit, breathe, choose." I opened the pantry, reached past a box of contractor-grade trash bags, and pulled out the file box with the torn lid. The tabs are old grocery receipts cut into flags: Whitford, River West. Invoices April. Payroll May. I set them on the table I built the summer after Maya was born, when Amara made lemonade with too much sugar and said, "Let's make it sweeter and remember it that way." The first page is a copy of a check with a logo that used to irritate me just on site, Whitford Development, and a stamped bank note that says returned. I put it flat in the light and smoothed the crease with my palm. The $2,800 emergency bill sits on top, like a dare. There's a coffee ring on the corner and a tiny oil smudge where my thumb always lands. I can hear Amara's voice, the practical kindness of a woman who knew the price of everything and the worth of more. "We'll make it back," she said in 2015. "We're good. We were good. They were not." My phone lit the room with a cheap blue square. A text from Maya. "Home safe. Love you." A second later, a photo, her on a couch I didn't recognize, ring a bright moon. My heart jumped and then fell. Behind her, on a glass table, a leather folio like the one from dinner glowed under a lamp. The caption said, "Winnetka meeting tomorrow, so excited." The house went quiet enough that I could hear the refrigerator cycle. I opened the top drawer and pulled out a small spiral notebook, the one I used to track time and materials, 1 page per job, no lies. I wrote the date, October 6th. Then I wrote the line I couldn't put back in my mouth. "Evan called me a nobody. Richard knows me." Under it, I wrote the numbers like prayer beads. $78,450 Maya's college fund we raided and never restored. $23,900 ring appraisal, $12,300 a catering deposit if they were telling the truth, $2,800 the bill that broke our back without admitting it. I am not a man of speeches or scenes. When a board bows, you don't instead argue, you clamp and correct. When a wall sips out of square, you don't instead yell. You shave and shim. I stared at the return check until the ink felt damp again and said aloud to a room that loved me back, "I will not be erased." I washed the restaurant smell off my hands. The fancy salt gritty at the sink. My phone buzzed again. Calendar invite. Tasting Saturday 2 p.m. Winnetka. Sent by a planner with a signature block longer than my invoice. Beneath it, a block of terms I read twice. Wire deposit by November 10th to Whitford Family Holdings. Not the venue. My chest cooled. Money has a way of telling the truth, if you give it a map. I put the invite in my pocket like it could burn a hole and walked back to the table. The box of papers waited, like an honest witness. I pulled a chair and sat. The past few years I have made peace with doing small good in small ways, fixing a porch for a couple who couldn't afford new steps, rehanging a front door for a woman whose husband left, and took the hinge pins by spite. Quiet work, paid in checks and thanks, and the pleasure of things that close smooth. And yet there are debts that don't sit right until you put them on a table and stare them into speech. I set the 2015 check that never cleared at the center and laid 2 subcontractor invoices beside it. Men who wore their backs out on our frames and took cash advances from me I could barely afford. I traced my finger along the line where the LLC's name sat. I remembered the office with the glass wall and the assistant who mispronounced my last name and the partner who said, "We'll settle up end of month." End of which month, I never asked. That's on me. Outside, the streetlight hummed. A metro horn called from far off. I took a breath that felt like climbing out of cold water and flipped the notebook to a fresh page. I wrote a name I had sworn not to write again because writing it meant I was not done with fighting. Dana O'Malley, then a number I still knew. The file box rustled like a curtain in a draft. I didn't set hit call. Not yet. Calling is a plan, and plans require clean hands. I closed the notebook, slid it under the unpaid check, and whispered something I hadn't said since Amara died. "Watch me." I turned off the kitchen light and left the papers where they were, laid out like a blueprint. In the dark, the white of the check glowed faintly. I let it. I wanted it to be the last thing I saw before sleep. It was. I slept in my boots and woke to the smell of sawdust that wasn't there. Thursday morning, October 7th, the bungalow held its breath like it didn't want to start the day with me. I grabbed my thermos, locked the schlag, and drove north on Cicero past the bakery that puts out trays at 6:30. The radio was all ads for equity loans and Miracle Knives. I shut it off and listened to the rattle in my truck door that only shows up when I'm thinking about money. Work helps. I replaced 2 links of baseboard in an Albany Park rental where the landlord handed me keys and said, "No rush, just don't scuff the paint." I set my miter saw on a flattened refrigerator box and cut pine to the same rhythm as my heart. Measure, cut, coax, nails whisper in, colk bead smooth as a prayer. I kept telling myself the same sentence I use when I'm trying not to break. It's only wood. At lunch I sat on the back stoop, ate from a brown bag, and stared at my phone like it might tell me I dreamed last night. Instead, it offered a bank notification, Whitford Development, and the subject line that put air behind my eyes. Refinance balloon due, $699,842, December 20th. The number sat on my screen like a full trash can. Someone dared me to kick. Same stylized W logo from the check that bounced in 2015. Same men, different month. I enlarged the notice until the pixels showed and read it twice. The line that mattered wasn't the amount, it was the date. December 20th meant they were moving pieces right now and would keep moving them until everyone forgot what they saw. I don't cry in daylight. The trick is to blink slow and breathe through your nose. I folded the phone into my pocket like it could cut me, and went back inside to sand the caulk line with a wrapped finger like my father taught me. When I finished the trim, I swept sawdust with slow strokes until the floor looked like nothing had ever been broken. The second job was a back porch step in Irving Park. The tread had split where the nail line ran too close to the edge. I pried it up, sistered a clean stringer, and reset a fresh board with decking screws so the next guy wouldn't curse my name. The owners were 2 teachers saving for a baby. They paid me in a check and a Tupperware of lasagna. For later, the woman said. I took it, thanked them, and carried the warm weight like proof I was still the kind of man people trusted to fix small things. At dusk, I parked under the maple that leans toward my driveway and just sat. The house's porch light glowed like it was waiting for a better version of me. My phone buzzed with a text I didn't want to read. "Maya, you around?" I typed always and hit send. She called instead. Her voice was bright the way people talk when they sit you're walking through a dark room and don't want to admit it. "Super quick," she said. Question. What do you think about adding me to the venue contract so communication is easier? Who asked that? The planner. Well, Evan said it makes sense. Who's paying the deposit? His family. Why? Because whoever pays writes the rules, I said. And whoever signs carries the debt. I tried to sound like a father and not a man balancing receipts on a knife edge. We didn't fight. We hung up with a soft promise to talk later, and I put the lasagna in my fridge like a good luck charm. The kitchen smelled like soap and something metal, the scent that comes when a hot day ends. Friday morning, I woke before my alarm, stared at the ceiling fan, and remembered $78,450 the way I remember the sound of my wife's laugh. It's not just a number, it's late nights, handwritten checks, and the day we emptied a college account to keep men paid so they could buy milk. I brushed my teeth, spit, watched the foam swirl like it was going somewhere important. By noon, the mail came, 3 coupons, a utility bill, and a thick, glossy catering brochure addressed to Maya Whitford pending. The name made my fingers cold. Inside, an invoice printed on cream paper, deposit due November 10th, $12,300. Wiring instructions to Whitford Family Holdings, not the caterer, not the venue. I set the brochure beside the 2015 check on my table, and the two looked at each other like guilty cousins. Around 2 o'clock, I fixed a wobbly banister for Mrs. Novak across the alley. She pays me in cash folded twice and Polish chocolates I pretend I like. You look tired, she said. I told her about the banister angle, and not about how the inside of my chest felt like snow melt under a hard crust. That evening I walked through the bungalow, turning on lights one by one, the way I do when I can't stand the quiet. In the bathroom I noticed the mirror needed defogging and laughed at myself. There was no steam. I splashed water anyway. The face looking back had sawdust in the eyebrows and a line I don't remember earning. I changed shirts and sat at the kitchen table, my hands flat beside the papers like I was making a promise. My phone let out the small double chime that means Maya, a string of texts that felt like rocks thrown at a window. Maya, do you know anything about a car loan? Me, what car loan? Maya, Evan surprised me, Bowles/a Range Rover deal. I thought it was in his name. Maya, I'm getting payment reminders. Maya, did I sign something? The world tilted a fraction. Call me, I typed, and the phone rang before I could breathe. It's Sep's probably fine, she said, too fast. He said I just needed to e-sign a thing so I could pick it up while he was in a meeting. Read me the email, I said. She scrolled. I could hear the sound her finger makes on glass. It says, to DocuSign, co-buyer authorization, cesspit. She swallowed. Is that bad? Not if it sups what you wanted, I said. But it sups not what I want for you. Dad, please. Can we not? Okay, I said. Forward it to me. We still looked together. We hung up with our love intact, and our understanding dented. At 9, I reheated the lasagna, ate standing up, and stared at the tab that says Whitford Family Holdings like it was a snake behind glass. I underlined November 10th on the invoice and wrote $12,300 on a sticky note, then stuck it to the front of the file box where it would annoy me into action. 11:30, the house got really quiet. The kind of quiet where you hear the hot water pipes tick and the wind catch in the downspout. I went to the garage, flipped on the bare bulb, and stood in the smell of oil and cedar until my shoulders came down. The pegboard still holds Amara's gardening tools in the shape she left them. I traced the outline of the trowel and told the truth to no one. I'm scared. Back inside, I put the Range Rover email next to the catering invoice and the 2015 return check. Like building a small, ugly triptych. I opened my notebook, wrote FRI October 8th at the top, and listed the facts like I sifted list materials for a job. $699,842, refinance balloon, due December 20th, Whitford Dev. $12,300 catering deposit by November 10th, wires Whitford Family Holdings. Range Rover co-buyer e-sign. $78,450 college fund rated 2015. I put a square beside each and stared until my eyes burned. Sometime after midnight, I dozed in the chair. At 2:03 a.m., my phone vibrated with a whisper. Maya again, just one line. Love you. That's the kind of message you keep. I put it in a folder called Proof of Good in my head. I went to the sink, drank tap water from my palm, and caught my reflection in the dark window like a stranger standing in my yard. I took my old flip folder from the junk drawer, plastic sleeves where I keep printed screenshots because paper doesn't drop calls. I slid the catering invoice into a sleeve, the refinance notice into another, and the car email into a third. I made 3 photocopies because paper has rules and I like rules I can see. The copier whirred in the den, then spit my anger back as tidy rectangles. At 2:11 a.m., I did the thing I'd been walking around all day. I opened contacts and found a name I'd saved under O'Malley. Do not use after the last time I swore I was done with chasing men who hide money behind initials. My thumb hovered. I typed instead because words look calmer in bubbles than in the dark. Dana, it's me. I need the kind of truth you print on paper. I stared at the message long enough to know it was the right sentence. Then I hit send and watched it leave like a nail leaving a board, clean, final, something I could build on. If you want the truth to stand up in daylight, you buy it in copies. That's what I told myself on October 9th, sitting in a diner on Elston where the coffee burns your tongue and the booths squeak like old knees. I slid into the corner seat, back against the wall, so I could see the door. At 12:07 a.m., I'd texted Dana O'Malley, and by noon she was already there, tan trench coat, legal pad tucked under her arm like scripture. Dana has the kind of face you remember because it looks like it remembers you. She ordered coffee black, no sugar. You look worse than last time, she said, flipping the pad open. I pushed an envelope across the formica, thick with bills that smelled like a job site. Retainer, I said. $1,450. My hand shook, but not enough to spill the coffee. We doing this by the book? She asked. Only way, I said. No hacks, no doors left open, clerk counters, stamped requests, public liens, UCC filings. If it sips not daylight, I don't set want it. Dana nodded. Whitford? Father and son, Richard and Evan. I slid the catering invoice, the refinance notice, and the co-buyer email across the table. She skimmed, lips moving like a carpenter reading a blueprint. Dirty wiring, she muttered. Money hopping through accounts. They separ moving deposits to season funds before the refinance hits. Classic. She scribbled dates, arrows, account names. You want me to check the LLC web? Every shell, every P.O. box. The waitress poured refills. I watched the coffee flood the cup until it trembled at the rim. Dana tapped her pen. Anything personal tied to your daughter? I leaned in. Range Rover loan. Co-signer without consent. Venue deposit in her pending name. And the ring $23,900 from Whitford Family Holdings. Not Evan. Dana Sip's eyes hardened. They sipped her laundering control through her signature. If she marries in, she inherits the mess. I swallowed. Not if I burn the mess first. She closed the pad. I settle pulls Secretary of State records, lien histories, UCCs. You settle have copies, not screenshots, copies. We shook hands. No eye contact, just grip. When she left, the bell on the diner door chimed like a small alarm. That afternoon, I called Renee Patel, an attorney I hadn't spoken to since 2016. She met me in her Bronzeville office, walls lined with framed verdicts and the smell of lemon polish. Renee wore glasses low on her nose and listened like a priest. Mechanic Sepst's lien from 2015, she said, reading the copy of my old invoices. Normally dead paper, but she tapped the dates. If you prove fraud and continuity, you can still file a complaint and ask for equitable relief. It SEP's a long shot, but it SEP's a shot. What do I need? I asked. Affidavits from subcontractors, evidence of payment promises, any written admission, and a good reason you're set for filing now. Because my daughter SEP's about to marry into the same pocket that stole from her college fund. Renee nodded slowly. That SIP's a reason. She circled December 20th on her calendar with a red pen. File before then. You want leverage? That SIP's your liver. Back home, I rekeyed the schlag on my front door, October 21st. Old key in the trash, new click in the lock. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. The house smelled of pine from the shavings in my coat pocket. I spread invoices across the kitchen table under the work light, every page weighed down with a coffee mug. My life reduced to paper and staples. Saturday came, October 23rd. Maya insisted I join her and Evan for a tasting in Winnetka. Just taste the food, Dad, she said. I went because sometimes showing up is its own strategy. The Whitford mansion looked like money washed and ironed. The kitchen gleamed with marble counters. Staff moved like choreography. Evan raised his glass, voice carrying "Our family protects our own." His father watched me over the rim, jaw tight. A chef set down a folder of vendor packets on the island, pages flapping from the draft of the back door. I pretended to admire the menu and asked, "Mind if I take a picture so I remember the options?" The chef shrugged. "Sure." My phone clicked, catching not just the scallops but the wiring instructions. Wire $12,300 by November 10th to Whitford Family Holdings. Not the caterer, not the venue. Richard noticed. His eyes narrowed. He raised his glass higher, voice flat. "Family protects our own." This time the silence after was thicker. That night my phone buzzed. Dana again. November 5th report. Range Rover note. Co-signer Maya J. Last month. Payment $1, 187 month. First payment wired from Whitford LLC. I printed it, stapled it, and laid it beside the unpaid 2015 invoice and the catering wire instructions. 3 points of proof. 3 nails into one coffin. I sat in the kitchen, the schlage clicking behind me like punctuation, and wrote in my spiral, OCT 9 Diner, Retainer 4. OCT 21 Riki Lock. October 23rd Tasting. Whitford Holdings Wire Photo. November 5th. Range Rover Cosigner Report. $1,187 per month. I underlined $78,450 again, because some numbers don't let go. I whispered into the papers spread before me. If you want truth to stand up in daylight, you buy it in copies. Then I made 3. I don't swing hammers at people. I file forms. That's what October 26th taught me. That morning, I carried a folder thicker than a tool belt into Renee Patel Sep's office. The blinds threw slats of light across her desk, making stripes on the papers I spit to copied. She adjusted her glasses, flipped the pages, and smiled a lawyer Sep's smile. Good. You Sep's got leverage now. First move, the Range Rover. I asked Maya to open her email again, this time with Renee sitting beside her on speakerphone. The message thread showed the DocuSign request, co-buyer authorization, and the timestamp. Maya's voice cracked. I thought it was just paperwork to let me pick up the car. Forward it to me, Renee said. We set freeze this. That e-signature is contestable. He can set bind you without full consent. Maya whispered. Am I in trouble? No, I said. They are. We hung up, and I drove straight to the dealership with a copy of the contract. The manager paled when I laid the papers down. We'll review this, he stammered. I made him initial a note that the account was frozen pending legal review. Paper with ink, something I could hold. Next, subcontractors. Luis, my old union buddy, made 2 calls. By October 29th, I sat in a Southside diner with men who still remembered the River West job. Their hands looked like mine, thick, cracked, stained by years of carrying other men's weight. You never got paid either? One asked. Not a cent, I said, sliding copies of my invoices across the table. I covered payroll out of my kid Sep's college fund. They cursed softly, then signed affidavits Renee had drafted, sworn statements that Whitford Development had stiffed them. I slid each notarized page into my binder like laying bricks. The ring was next. I didn't tell Maya I was checking. I just took it to a jeweler I trusted near Logan Square. He appraised it under bright light, lens pressed to his eye. Beautiful stone, he said, but the account on file here isn't in your son-in-law-to-be's name. It was billed to Whitford Family Holdings. How much? I asked. He tapped the paper. $23,900. Paid in full, corporate account. I thanked him, folded the appraisal, and slid it behind the subcontractor affidavits. Another nail. By November 2nd, Dana called with her web of LLCs. 5 shells, she said, all tied to the same P.O. box. One called Hemingway Street Holdings. Another, R.W. Partners 2. Same mailing address, same registered agent. Classic laundering. And the money? $180,000 wire, she said. bounced through a catering company account for 48 hours, then landed in RW Partners 2. Paper trail sips clean, but the timing stinks. I wrote it in my notebook, $180,000, wire RW Partners 2, November 2nd. Then I made 3 copies. That week, I began assembling the binder that would become my weapon. Each page had a tab: Range Rover, ring, subcontractors, wire, refinance. I triple-stapled corners, labeled dates in red ink, and kept 1 copy locked in my bungalow, 1 in Renee's office, 1 in Dana's hands. If Richard wanted to erase me, he'd need 3 fires. The work kept me steady. I'd get home from patching drywall or replacing door sweeps, lay the day's earnings on the counter, and then add 1 more piece of evidence to the binder. It felt like building a wall I could finally hide behind, or maybe climb over. On November 12th, Richard himself reached out. "Let's clear the air," he said over the phone. His voice was all oil and civility, just us. "The club tomorrow noon." I agreed. I didn't tell Maya. I didn't tell Evan. I didn't even tell Luis. But I told my notebook, November 12th, club meet, bring recorder, ask permission. The next day, I walked into the mahogany-paneled dining room of a private club I had no business being in. Waiters in white jackets floated between tables. Richard sat with his back to the window, sunlight making his silver hair gleam. "Son," he said as I sat down, "we all had cash flow rough patches." He pushed an envelope across the linen tablecloth. Inside, a check for $20,000. Symbolic closure. Let Seps not blow up the kid Seps' happiness. I left it unopened. "This isn't set about symbolic closure. Reverse the car loan. Clear the ring into Maya Seps' name debt-free. Pay the subcontractors. And stop using her signature to move your money." Richard Dust's smile thinned. "You Sefter negotiating above your grade." "No," I said, leaning forward. "I set him talking to the man who used Shell LLCs to starve my payroll and steal $78,450 from my daughter Seps's future." He stiffened. The waiter set down bread and backed away, pretending not to hear. I pulled a small notepad from my pocket and set it on the table. "I like to record this for my notes," I said. "Do you consent?" Richard hesitated. Then, with the smallest nod, "Fine." I clicked the pen recorder on. "So tell me," I asked, "why does Hemingway Street Holdings share a P.O. box with you?" He smirked. "Standard consolidation." "Why did RW Partners 2 receive a $180,000 wire from a catering account?" "Temporary liquidity. It happens." Every word he spoke was another brick in my wall. I left the club without the check, but with something far more valuable, his voice. That night, I locked the pen recorder in my toolbox and sat at my kitchen table with the binder. I replayed his calm, dismissive answers, then stapled a transcript page on top. November 12th, Richard Whitford admission. At 10:14 p.m., a florist van pulled up outside my bungalow. A delivery man left an envelope with no flowers. Inside was a single card, typed in neat script: "Let it go. Families protect their own." I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I slid the card into the binder behind the transcript. Proof doesn't always come in numbers. Sometimes it comes in threats. I whispered to the empty room. "You want me to let it go? Watch me hold it tighter." He called me son at a table I couldn't afford and tried to pay me to forget my own child. The next morning, November 13th, I brewed coffee strong enough to stand a spoon and laid 3 packets across my kitchen table like I was blessing them. Consumer complaint, auto fraud, affidavits and unpaid labor, River West, and notice of intent to record mechanics lien. I wrote my name in blue ink so no one could say a stamp machine did it for me. Renee was waiting with the elevator door propped when I reached her Bronzeville office. She had yellow tabs sprouting from a draft complaint like a porcupine. "We lead with the co-buyer scam," she said, tapping the paragraph that named Range Rover Chicago, the DocuSign subject line co-buyer authorization, and the payment line, $1, 187 month. "Already past due once. Attach the dealership manager's note that you froze the account," she added. I slid the handwritten slip from my folder. "Account on hold pending legal review," initialed JD, and she stapled it under the complaint with the satisfaction of a woman who enjoys proper order. Next, the labor packet. 2 notarized statements from the Southside guys, signatures still wet, plus my 2015 invoices, and the returned bank stamp that made my palms heat. Renee put a paper clip where the judge's eye would land first. "We're not pretending the statute didn't age," she said. "We're arguing fraud and continuity. Same principle, revolving shells, unpaid work rolling forward to the refinance." She underlined December 20th on the calendar. "That balloon due date is our clock." Finally, the lien notice. My handwriting looked steadier than I felt. Owner, agent, Whitford Development, Hemingway Street Holdings, SROW Partners 2, same mailing address. Property description, job performed, unpaid balance, attached affidavits. It read like memory that finally found paper. We walked across to the courthouse annex. The clerk counter smelled like copy toner and floor wax. I took a number, A114, and waited between a roofer arguing about a permit and a woman paying a dog bite fee. When they called me up, I slid the packets through the slot, palms flat. "Stamped copies?" I asked. My voice came out calm. The clerk thumped each packet with a stamp that sounded like a heartbeat, 11/13 in purple ink. She handed me receipt slips with tiny print and a barcode. I held them like holy cards. "Certified mail next," Renee said. We walked to the post office on Michigan, where the line curled around a rack of bubble mailers. I addressed 3 identical envelopes. Richard Whitford, care of Whitford Family Holdings, Hemingway Street Holdings, registered agent. The teller slid me certified mail stickers, and I pressed them on like labels for ammunition. I kept the green cards for my binder. Return receipt requested because I wanted the day a signature had to face me. Back home, I called the dealership and asked for the general manager, not the kid with the tie who had handed us coffee. I read the first line of the complaint. So slowly he couldn't pretend he'd misheard. "Under Illinois consumer law," I said, "we are contesting an unauthorized co-buyer contract and any payment history attached to it. The account is frozen, and any negative report will be considered retaliatory." He cleared his throat. "Sir, we're happy to work with you." "Good. Work with this." At 2, Dana texted a photo of the Secretary of State printouts, 5 LLCs stacked like cups, Whitford Family Holdings, Hemingway Street Holdings, RW Partners 2, Lakefront Ventures LLC, and Abbott and Finch Development. Same registered agent, same P.O. box in the loop. She added a line, "Press will love the family protects our own quote if they ever need it." I didn't answer. Some matches you don't strike until the wind is right. By 4, I'd tabbed my binder like a cabinet maker, jealous of a perfect edge. Auto, ring, labor, wire, riffé, threat. The florist card with its neat little violence. I printed a transcript of the club lunch and titled it in block letters, November 12th, consent recording. Standard consolidation admission. Then I did the thing that makes or breaks a man like me. I locked 1 copy in the steel file under my bed, slid 1 into a messenger bag I'd keep on me, and dropped the 3rd at Renee's, where it would sit like an anchor behind her desk. If Richard wanted to make this disappear, he'd need 3 storms. That night, I called Maya. I kept my voice level, like I was explaining a cut list to an apprentice. "You sit you're not in trouble," I said. "But we sit you're undoing a car loan you didn't sit agree to and a pattern of wires using your name." "You stir making him angry," she said. "Small." "He made me angry 10 years ago," I said. "He doesn't set get to." We stayed on the line without speaking for a minute, the way we used to listen to rain hit the bungalow roof when she was little. When she finally whispered, "Okay," I wrote it down in the spiral, as if a judge might someday ask what consent sounded like. On November 15th, the green certified cards began to boomerang home, signed by people who initial for men like Richard. I pressed each card into the binder under notice delivered. Paper is slow revenge, but it doesn't forget. I spent the 16th and 17th doing work that pays, installing weather stripping on a Lincoln Square brownstone, rehanging a basement door that swelled in the fall damp. Between jobs, I called the jeweler's office. "We need the ring ownership letter reissued," I said. "Gift to Maya J. No lien, No corporate account. The clerk coughed, that careful cough of people who have to ask permission to breathe. We'll have to get approval from, I cut him off clean, from the person whose name is on the appraisal, or from the entity that paid the bill. A pause. I'll speak with management. On the 18th, I met Luis in a parking lot behind a hardware store, wind snapping our jackets. We sat on my tailgate with coffee steaming in paper cups. You're doing it right, he said, flipping the binder open. No shouting, all stamps. He tapped the florist card and snorted. Fancy people don't know they tell on themselves when they try to scare carpenters. We talked mechanics, literally and legal. He advised me to file a notice of representation with the dealership, so salespeople stopped helpfully calling Maya directly. I wrote the line on a sticky note and stuck it to my dashboard. Then he handed me 2 folded letters, subcontractor bank confirmations. Cleared within 7 days of settlement, right? He said. When we get it, I answered. He nodded like a man who has carried a ladder up 3 flights without complaint. November 20th, Sunday night. I stood in the Winnetka Mansion's foyer for a vendor walkthrough I wasn't invited to but wasn't asked to leave. Staff swirled in black and white. The study door was closed again. I could feel the expensive quiet behind it. On the console table sat a printed guest Wi-Fi card with the network name and password in gold script. I took a photo after asking the butler. Polite as church. Mind if I keep the network for my phone while I'm here? Of course, he said. Because men like him don't imagine men like me know what to do with permission. I didn't hack anything. I didn't need to. All I wanted was certainty that, on a holiday night, if I pressed a button on a cheap clicker, the television over the sideboard would show public pages. Secretary of State filings, a refinance notice, a ring appraisal. Truth anyone could load if they knew what to search. I paired the remote in the den like I was checking a smoke detector. Pairing successful flashed and vanished. I felt my pulse slow. No ambush, just light. On the way out, Richard caught me at the bottom of the stairs, that smile again, stretched tight. One word at dinner, he said softly, and you'll never see your daughter again. His breath smelled like mint, an old threat. I leaned against the newel post like I was just checking the grain. Then make sure I don't need to speak, I said. Fix the car. Return the ring free and clear. Pay the men you owe, and take her name off every wire. He watched me like I was drywall he could punch through. He didn't. Back in my truck, I wrote the exchange in my spiral November 20th. Threat repeated. Family protects our own. Under it, I wrote the sentence that steadied me, so do I. On November 21st, Renee drafted a press statement we'd only use if they smeared me first. 1 paragraph, no adjectives, 3 facts. Consumer complaint filed 11/13. Notice of intent to lien delivered, co-buyer dispute in review. She added a line I loved. All documents are public and available upon request. We printed 2 copies and locked them up. The last thing I did before the week turned was simple. I rechecked the binder's spine for cracks, tightened 1 D-ring, and put the florist card at the very back where it could look at everything it tried to intimidate. Then I laid the binder on the passenger seat like a passenger. Tuesday would be the rehearsal tasting before Thanksgiving. I could already feel the heat from the fireplace I'd stand beside. I could hear the hush after glass touches glass. I could see the screen light up with the truth no one wanted at a holiday table. I drove home under a sky the color of cold tin and parked the truck. Inside, the schlag clicked behind me, and the house exhaled. I set the binder on the table, turned off the kitchen light, and let the white tabs glow like teeth in the dark. Tomorrow, they would greet me with polished smiles. Tomorrow, I'd bring daylight. He didn't hit me. He shook the ground under my kid. That's how I think of November 22nd, the rehearsal tasting at the Winnetka Mansion. The driveway was lined with German sedans and American SUVs polished to mirrors. Staff in white shirts carried trays of hors d'oeuvres past the hedges trimmed sharp enough to cut. Inside, the house hummed with money, heat radiators clicking, marble echoing every step. I wore the same jacket I'd had at the oyster dinner because it told the truth about me. I work, I fix, I don't costume. The study door was locked again. The brass knob gleamed under the chandelier. I paused outside just long enough to hear muffled voices. Richard's low baritone, Evan's clipped laugh. Then a silence. Then a drawer sliding shut. In the kitchen, I found a staff member stacking invoices on a counter. Running late with wires, he muttered to the chef beside him. Deposit bounced once, cleared on retry. He didn't notice me until I asked for a napkin. His eyes widened. He said nothing more. But I had enough, a bounced wire. Whitford money, moving like a drunk crossing traffic. On the patio, string lights swayed in the cold. Maya stood there with her hands wrapped around a glass she wasn't drinking. She held her phone toward me like a confession. A text thread lit up the screen. Bring your social for the venue contract. Need by Thursday. My name in her eyes looked like panic. They want my social security number for the contract, she whispered. Evan says it's standard. I took the phone, stared at the blue bubbles, and handed it back. Giuseppe already on the car, the caterer, the emails. This isn't set protection. It sets shackles. She blinked fast, like tears weren't set aloud in a house like this. Are you trying to ruin this for me? I breathed through my nose slow, so my voice wouldn't snap. I'm trying to keep you free. There sits a difference. She turned away, but she didn't walk off. Sometimes silence is still trust, just bruised. That evening, I stood by the fireplace while guests filled plates with turkey samples and miniature pies. The wood crackled. Richard drifted toward me with a wineglass and a smile like paint over rust. He leaned close enough that I could smell mint and bourbon. One word out of line tonight, he whispered, and you'll never see your daughter again. I kept my eyes on the flames. Then make sure I don't need to say a word, I murmured back. Fix it before I have to. He laughed softly, a sound only I heard, and walked away to refill glasses. I felt the binder in my truck like it was sitting in my chest, proof enough to choke him, but I didn't move yet. Patience is harder than anger. Halfway through dessert, Dana called. I stepped onto the patio, phone pressed to my ear, breath fogging in the November air. I traced the refinance, she said. The $699,842 balloon due December 20th is tied to a River West tower. They're seasoning funds by running deposits through family LLCs. If the refinance collapses, Richard loses the property. That's why they're sucking Maya into wires. They need her clean credit, her name, her future. I leaned against the cold railing, the string lights buzzing overhead. Can we prove it? Public filings, she said. Already in your binder. You got enough to ruin him twice. Court and press. Good, I said. Keep copies. Always. Back inside, I found Maya near the piano, Evan whispering in her ear. She looked pale, tired. I touched her shoulder. If you want this wedding, we'll do it clean. No contracts with your social. No wires in your name. Agreed. She nodded once, but her lips trembled. Are you sure we can fight them? I met her eyes. I mitched am not sure. I mitched certain. That night, back in my bungalow, I opened the binder and slid Dana's new report under the Refi tab. I checked the Wi-Fi card photo from the mansion. Guest network, Whitford Gala Pass. Protect 1988. I'd paired the remote earlier, legally, with permission. I didn't need secrets, I just needed timing. On Thanksgiving Eve, in front of turkey and cranberry sauce, I'd put daylight where Richard thought there were shadows. The house felt smaller as I turned off lights. My phone buzzed with a new message. A reporter I hadn't set contacted wrote, heard rumblings about Whitford Holdings refinance, care to comment. I deleted the draft reply 3 times before writing one sentence. Please seek public filings. Then I shut the phone, slid the binder under my bed, and sat in the quiet until my breathing matched the tick of the radiator. Tomorrow I too set the table with truth. The cranberry sauce jiggled when I set down the binder. Thanksgiving Wednesday at the Whitford mansion, the long dining table ran like a runway under a chandelier the size of a small car. 12 place settings. Linen napkins folded like little white churches. Richard presided at the head with a glass of burgundy. Evan sat at his right hand, hovering over Maya's wrist like ownership. I took the chair at the far end, where the help usually rests their eyes. The room smelled like sage, lemon oil, and pride. Before grace, Richard said, rising with a practiced smile, I want to say how grateful I am that our families will soon be one. Legacy is a duty, a good name, a fortress. He let the word fortress sit there, sturdy as a bank vault. I stood before he could sit. My heart thudded once, then fell into the steady beat it finds when I'm cutting a line that matters. If legacy is a duty, I said, and good names matter, then we should start this family with the truth. I looked at Maya first. What I'm about to say is to protect you. A cousin snorted. Evan's smile tightened. Richard's jaw bunched like a knuckle. I placed the slim black binder on the table next to the turkey and the rose centerpiece. I won this to read you documents. I sit will tell you what they say. Evan chuckled, low. Is this really necessary, sir? Yes, I said, without looking at him. Because my daughter Sep's name is already on things she never agreed to. Maya whispered, Dad. Breathe, I told her, and I did too. I started at the beginning because the beginning is where people hide their intentions. 10 years ago in 2015, I framed 4 floors on a River West project. We were tired, and we were proud. The company that hired me dissolved before paying a penny. We covered payroll out of my child's college fund, $78,450 because men needed to buy milk. A check from Whitford Development bounced. The Shell LLC vanished. We told ourselves we'd make it back. I touched the binder. We didn't. Richard smiled like a courtroom bench. Ancient history. Except the past doesn't set die, I said. It gets filed. I flipped a tab. 2 subcontractors have signed sworn statements they were stiffed on that job. I covered them with money that belonged to my daughter. Their affidavits are in here. My return check is in here. And Richard, I finally looked down the table. So are the LLCs you used then and now. Same P.O. Box. Same registered agent, Hemingway Street Holdings. Raw W Partners 2, Whitford Family Holdings. A muscle jumped in his cheek. He swallowed and lifted his wine. You Seth misunderstood perfectly ordinary structures. I nodded like a man who's heard 100 excuses for why a beam sags. Then we come to the ring. I looked at Maya's hand. The stone caught light like a siren, appraised at $23,900, and paid for by Whitford Family Holdings, not by your fiancé. If it's a gift, then it's hers free and clear, with no lien, no strings, and no expectation of access to her credit. That's what a gift is. Evan Testa's chair creaked. You still embarrassing her. I set protecting her, I said. There steps a difference. I turned another tab. The car, Range Rover. Co-buyer authorizations e-signed under pressure so she could pick up a vehicle while you were in a meeting. Payment $1,187 a month. First payment made by a Whitford LLC. I met Maya's eyes. You didn't consent to carry that debt, and you don't have to. The room had gone still. You can hear money listen when it thinks it might be accused. At the sideboard, a 70-inch television sat black and glossy. On the console beneath it, a printed card, Guest Wi-Fi Whitford Gala Vertical Bar, password, Protect 1988. I'd paired the remote legally the other night with the butler's polite nod. Public filings aren't secrets, they're flashlights. Richard says, ordinary structures, I continued, lifting the remote from my jacket pocket. Let's see ordinary. I pressed a button, and the TV woke, blue light washing the silverware. I airplayed a screen loaded with Secretary of State records, 5 boxes with the familiar names, addresses, and that loop P.O. box. I zoomed slowly. Whitford Family Holdings, registered agent, Abbott and Finch, registered services. Mailing address, P.O. box. I scrolled to Hemingway Street Holdings, and then R.W. Partners 2. I didn't narrate what people could read with their own eyes. I let ink do the work. That's public, I said, into the quiet. This too, I slid to the refinance notice. Bold type read, balloon payment due, $699,842, December 20th. The stylized W in the corner matched the one on my return check from 2015. Aunt somebody gasped. A cousin said, oh, small. Evan went the color of old paper. Richard didn't sit. He braced his fingertips on the tablecloth the way a man does when the floor shifts. The catering deposit, I went on, calmer than I felt. $12,300 due November 10th. Wired not to the venue or the caterer, but to Whitford Family Holdings. I asked permission to take a picture of the vendor packet at the tasting. The chef said yes. That's also public now. I tapped the binder. Wire hops through a catering company account for 48 hours, lands in RW Partners 2. Someone thinks seasoning funds through family makes them clean. It doesn't. Richard spat. You have no right to. I asked to record our club lunch, I said, still not raising my voice. You consented. Your exact words, when I asked why Hemingway Street shares a P.O. box with you, were standard consolidation. I pulled out the pen recorder, pressed play, and let his own voice drift down the table like smoke. It wasn't a gotcha. It was a mirror. Evan Nesta's mother stood. This is indecent, she hissed. It is Thanksgiving. It sets Wednesday, I said. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving. Today is for telling the truth before we pass the gravy. Richard laughed, a brittle sound that broke on its own echo. You sir nothing, he said softly. Not for the room, just for me. A tradesman with a grudge. Yes, I said. A tradesman who keeps receipts. I turned off the TV. The screen went black, and everyone could see themselves reflected in it for a second, small and honest. I picked up a single card from the back of my binder and slid it across the linen toward Richard. The florist's neat threat sat between us. Let it go. Families protect their own. He stared, eyes flat. The room waited for him to say it wasn't him. He didn't. Here's my offer, I said, and the words sounded like a saw finding the line. Reverse the car loan and remove Maya completely. Reissue the ring as a gift in her name. No lien and no corporate tie. Pay the subcontractors on the 2015 job and put $78,450 plus 6% interest back where it came from into Maya's education account. Then sign a sworn statement tonight, acknowledging the debt chain and your role in it. I looked at Evan without blinking, and you stopped trying to draft her future into your refinance. The only sound for a breath was the tick of the chandelier's heat settling. Evan tried to recover swagger. You don't get to come into my family Sep's home and extort. Extortion is a threat to do a wrong, I said. This is a promise to do what Sep's right, or I file what I already have, in the morning, with copies. I felt Maya's hand grip the edge of the table. Dad. It sounded like a prayer that didn't know what to ask for. Richard Epst's wife spoke for the first time. Richard, she said, not looking at him. Is any of this untrue? His throat worked. He went to speak, and found himself trapped between two lies, the one he Sept been living and the one he Sept have to tell to defend it. He tried for a third way, minimize. Some of it is framed unfairly. Which part? I asked. Calm felt like a gift from a man I used to be. He stared at the florist card and then at the TV screen, Sips dead black. He took a long swallow of wine. In 2015, he said. Voice thin, a partner mishandled invoices. That partner resigned the spring, after I filed a complaint. I said, you remember me now because my complaint cost you a face you used to hide behind. His eyes flicked. He remembered. The fork at the oyster dinner hadn't fallen from surprise. It had fallen from recognition. That was the twist turning in the room now. He had seen me before, not as a stranger, but as a man who wouldn't quit when paper could still speak. We can discuss terms, Richard said finally. Privately. Upstairs, his wife said, decisive. The room Seps new gravity, now. No, Evan blurted. You can stet, Dad Don stet. Don said what? She said. Admit what you said done, or keep smearing a girl into our books until the balloon lands. No one moved. Then chairs scraped on marble like a storm starting. Richard looked at me, not with hate now, but with calculation broken down into survival. You'll destroy my son, he said quietly. Your son invited me to dinner and called me nobody. I said, he said'll survive a lesson. I picked up the binder. We don't need to ruin anyone. We need to repair what you broke and protect what you were about to take. The rest happened in a different room. the study that always smelled like lemon oil. But before we moved, I said one last thing to Maya, so she'd know the whole time whose side I was on. No deals that keep you bound, I said. No signatures you don't read twice. I love you more than any document you'll ever sign. She nodded, eyes wet but steady. We walked past the locked study door that wasn't locked anymore. Upstairs, a notary would find a pen. Renee would join by speaker, paper would become oath. But in that dining room, for one breath, after the TV went dark, I watched a fortress learn it was only a house. As we turned to leave, I placed the remote on the sideboard, face up, next to the Wi-Fi card, with Protect 1988 printed in gold. Richard glanced at it like a man seeing his own password for the first time. He exhaled. Fine, he said. Let's draft. I lifted the binder. The cranberry sauce jiggled again, a small red heartbeat on white porcelain, and I thought, let it be the last thing that shakes tonight. I followed them up the stairs, one hand on the rail like a man steadying himself on a ladder he built. Behind me, the dining room held its breath. Forks quiet, legacy waiting to hear its new name. I didn't look back. We didn't leave with leftovers. We left with a draft. Upstairs in the Whitford mansion, the study smelled of lemon oil and cigar ash that never quite fades. The walls were lined with books chosen more for their gold spines than for reading. Richard stood behind the desk, hands braced on the surface like it was a lifeboat. His wife sat in a chair by the window, arms folded, her silence louder than anything else in the room. Evan hovered in the corner, pale, fidgeting with his phone, as if the right emoji could save him. I set the binder on the polished desk, careful not to scratch it. We're going to make this official, I said. Renee joined by speakerphone, her voice calm but edged with iron. Richard, we sipped her drafting a sworn affidavit. Every condition is clear and enforceable. If you fail to comply, we file immediately. Do you understand? Richard rubbed his temple, then lowered himself into the leather chair. I still signed something, but we said we're not parading dirty laundry. Dirty laundry? I leaned in, voice low. You tried to wash your son Sep's debts with my daughter Sep's name. That Sep's not laundry. That's Sep's theft. Renee cut through the tension. Here are the terms. 1. Repay $78,450 plus 6% interest into an education account solely in Maya's name within 48 hours. 2. Clear the Range Rover loan, remove her as co-buyer, and provide written confirmation. 3. Reissue the ring as a gift to Maya. No liens, no corporate account ties. 4. Pay subcontractors from the 2015 River West job within 7 days, with receipts. 5. A written apology, signed and notarized, admitting your role in these actions. Evan finally broke. Dad, you don't have to. Sit down, his mother snapped. Her first sharp words all night. He sat. Richard sighed, grabbed a fountain pen from the desk and muttered, Fine, draft it. I slid a legal pad across, and we dictated line by line. Every word was carved in present tense, leaving no door open. When he hesitated, I placed the florist card, the one that read, Let it go. Families protect their own, on the desk in front of him. He didn't touch it, but he kept glancing at it like it might combust. At the end, the notary, summoned by his wife with a clipped phone call, arrived in a blazer and serious eyes. She checked IDs, read the affidavit, and stamped the page with a satisfying thunk. Signed under penalty of perjury, she said. Do you agree? Richard's hand shook as he signed. Ink bled just a little on the downstroke of the R proof, that even men with fortresses in Winnica bleed when pressed. Upstairs, the study light glowed warm. Outside, cold November air pressed against the windows. Downstairs, guests whispered in the dining room, forks scraping plates they didn't taste. We left at 12:47 a.m., Maya clutching the binder against her chest, as if it were a shield. I walked her to my truck, helped her in, and drove back to Jefferson Park. We didn't speak until the schlag clicked behind us. She whispered, Dad, I didn't know. I know, I said. That sip's why I did. The next morning at 1:13 a.m., before I even slept, my phone buzzed, a wire confirmation. $180,000 transferred out of Whitford Family Holdings. Destination RW Partners 2. The timestamp was fresh. He was trying to outrun December 20th, moving funds like a man bailing water from a sinking boat. I took a screenshot, printed it, and slid it into the binder under a new tab. Shell Shuffle, November 24th, 1:13 a.m. Paper doesn't lie. At 9 o'clock sharp, Renee called. He wired money again, didn't he? Yeah, 180, through RW Partners 2. She sighed. Classic stall. He Sep's buying time to shore up the refinance. Doesn't matter. We Sep's got him locked with the affidavit. If he defaults, we file contempt. Maya brewed coffee in my kitchen, silent but steady. When she set a mug in front of me, I noticed her hands weren't shaking anymore. The ring glinted on a chain around her neck, not her finger. She'd moved it, her choice. That told me more than words. At noon, I walked to the mailbox. Inside, 3 green certified cards signed return receipts. Proof that Richard's people had accepted the lien notices. I pressed them flat on the table next to the affidavit, 4 corners of a box he couldn't climb out of. That evening, I fixed a loose stare from Mrs. Novak across the alley. She asked, "How sips your girl?" "Stronger than yesterday," I said, and meant it. But Richard wasn't set done. At 8:52 p.m., a courier dropped another envelope at my door. This one held a single sheet. Counter offer to restructure settlement. Wire transfers contingent on refinance closing December 20th. I laughed out loud. My daughter peeked in from the kitchen. "What is it?" "Desperation," I said, tearing the letter once, twice, then sliding the pieces into the trash. "We don't take counteroffers from thieves. We take payments." By the end of that week, subcontractors began texting me screenshots of cleared checks. 2 men who waited 7 years for wages finally got their money. Luis called me from his truck, voice rough. "Brother, you did it." He paid. On time. I sat at my table, pen in hand, and checked the box in my spiral. Subs paid, November 27th. 1 more corner closed. The Whitfords had tried to turn my daughter's name into collateral. Instead, their own name had turned into a liability. And I wasn't finished yet. Justice isn't a punch. It's a paper stamp. That's what I told myself on the morning of December 12th. Standing in the marble hallway of the Daly Center Courthouse in Chicago with a binder pressed to my chest like armor. The Whitfords didn't come. Of course they didn't. Men like Richard send lawyers instead. People in tailored suits who smell faintly of cologne and self-confidence. His counsel, a tall man with a briefcase polished enough to show reflections, introduced himself with a nod that tried to say this was all routine. "Mr. Whitford is unavailable," he said smoothly. Renee stood at my side, her blazer sharp, her tone sharper. "Mr. Whitford is bound by affidavit," she replied. "We are here to make it enforceable." The judge glanced over the papers, flipping pages with the efficiency of someone who knows lies tend to hide in the middle. Affidavits from subcontractors. Certified return receipts. The notarized settlement Richard had signed upstairs in his own study, hands shaking, and finally, the wire confirmation for $78,450 plus 6% interest, a deposit into an education account in Maya's name only, proof in black ink that the money was back where it belonged. "Settlement approved," the judge said. His gavel hit once. Quick, like a nail driven straight. Payments to subcontractors within 7 days. Complaint dismissed with prejudice upon full compliance. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. Outside the courthouse, the air bit cold enough to sting. Luis met me on the plaza steps, holding a styrofoam cup of coffee. "Got the texts," he said, handing me his phone. Screenshots from the subcontractors showed cleared checks landing in their accounts. Men who'd waited 7 years finally paid for work, their bodies still carried. One of them had texted, "Tell him thank you. Thought the world forgot us." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. The world didn't forget. It just needed reminding. Luis clapped my shoulder. "And you reminded them with stamps." At home that night, I checked the education account. There it was, $78,450 plus $4,707 interest =, $83,157. Not an apology, not time restored, but money put back where it was stolen. Maya leaned over my shoulder, staring at the screen. She didn't speak. She just placed her hand on mine and left it there. The Range Rover loan gone. Renee emailed the dealership's letterhead notice, contract void, buyer removed. Title adjusted accordingly. I slid the letter into the binder, one more page behind the auto fraud tab. The ring? A courier delivered a new appraisal on December 10th. Ownership. Gift to Maya J. Last name. Sole property. No lien, no debt. She clipped the chain back around her neck, stone glowing softer, now that it wasn't carrying a secret. The subcontractor's payments? Cleared, green certified cards? Filed. Every receipt where it belonged. I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a line in my spiral. Justice landed December 12th, 2025. Richard tried one last move. On December 14th, a reporter from the Tribune called me. We received a statement from Whitford Development, claiming they resolved a minor contract dispute with a former subcontractor. Do you wish to comment? I thought about the study upstairs, the affidavit under penalty of perjury, the florist card with its neat threat. I thought about Evan calling me a nobody. I gave the reporter one sentence. All documents are public record at the Daily Center. Then I hung up. By December 15th, the Tribune ran a small column in the business section. Whitford Family Holdings settles Leon dispute. Pays long overdue contractors. Buried under real estate gossip. But they're all the same. Proof that even the rich can't bury paper. That weekend, Maya and I walked through Lincoln Square to buy a Christmas tree. Snow clung to the branches. The seller tied the pine to the roof of my truck. She tugged her scarf tighter and said, "You didn't just protect me. You gave me back choices." I nodded. That's all I ever wanted. We decorated the tree with the old ornaments Amara had bought years ago. Paper stars, a ceramic hammer, glass birds. The lights glowed in the bungalow window. For the first time since October 6th, my chest felt open. On December 20th, the same day the Whitford refinance balloon came due, I sat at my table, spiral open. A text from Dana buzzed. Refi collapsed. River West property moving under new management. Richard sips out. I wrote it down in ink. Not to gloat, but to record. Because justice isn't memory, it's record. The bungalow was quiet. The Schlag lock clicked steady. Maya laughed from the living room, the sound of a daughter free. For the first time in years, I didn't need to chase anyone. The paper had chased for me. The house sounds different when you're not waiting for footsteps. That's what I noticed first, after the courthouse, after the wires cleared, after the liens were paid. My Jefferson Park bungalow, with its old radiators and stubborn floors, finally exhaled. I sat at the same kitchen table where I'd once cried over a crumpled $2,800 emergency bill. Tonight the surface was clean, except for one thing. The binder, its edges worn from weeks of travel, tabs bent from too many hands. I should have locked it away, but I left it in the open like a trophy, not because I won, but because it had carried me through. Maya came in, hair damp from the cold, carrying takeout containers. She set them down, shrugged off her coat, and looped the chain around her neck. The ring dangled there, not on her finger anymore, but resting against her heart. She caught me staring, and smiled faintly. "It's mine now," she said, "but I don't need to wear it the way he wanted me to." We ate quietly, the kind of silence that doesn't sit bruise. Halfway through, she asked, "Do you think I was blind?" "No," I said. "I think you trusted people you loved. That's not blindness, that's being human." She nodded, picked at her food, then whispered, "I love the idea of being safe." I put my fork down. Safety with strings isn't step safe. It steps a trap. Her eyes shone, but her voice was steady. "So, what now?" "Now you live," I said, "and you do it clean." Later, after she'd gone to bed, I pulled the spiral from the drawer and flipped to the first page I wrote on October 6th. Evan called me a nobody. Richard knows me. I traced the ink with my thumb, remembering the sting in my chest that night. Then I turned to the last page, where the handwriting was calm. Justice landed December 12th. That gap between the two entries, that's where the work was. Not the speeches, not the threats, not the fear. The paper, the stamps, the proof. I boxed the binder the next morning, labeled it in block letters closed, December 2025. I slid it onto the top shelf of the hall closet beside the Christmas lights and Amara's gardening gloves. It didn't belong in the trash. It belonged where we keep things we might need again, but hope we don't. On December 18th, I met Luis for coffee. He showed me his phone, screenshots of 2 subcontractors holding up pay stubs, grinning like men half their age. You gave them their dignity back, he said. I didn't give it, I corrected. I reminded someone it was already theirs. He sipped his coffee and smirked. Paper beats pedigree. I laughed, because it was true. 2 days later, on December 20th, the River West project changed hands. A banner went up, under new management. Dana sent me a photo. Richard had tried to outrun the balloon, but the refinance collapsed. Legacy reduced to a sign in front of scaffolding. I showed Maya. She stared at it for a long time, then said, "Funny how fast things fall." "Not fast," I said. "Just finally." That evening, the house glowed with the Christmas tree we'd bought in Lincoln Square. We hung the last ornament, a small hammer Amara had chosen years ago, and stood back. Maya's hand slipped into mine. "You didn't just save me," she said. "You gave me back a future." I squeezed her hand throat tight. That sip's all I ever wanted. The lights reflected in the window, bright against the Chicago winter. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel erased. Before I turned in that night, I recorded one last message in my spiral, not for courts or lawyers, but for myself. Keep copies, always. Then I added a line I wished I'd said aloud in the study, in front of everyone: "You didn't lose me. You gave me away." Because that's the truth of betrayal. When people try to erase you, they're not proving you're nothing. They're proving they're afraid of what you carry. And me? I carried every receipt, every affidavit, every signature, until daylight did what fists never could. The house was quiet. The lock clicked steady. My daughter slept free. That was justice enough. A month later, the banner on the River West site had changed to under new management. I drove past it on my way to a small repair job in Logan Square, slowed just enough to see the scaffold, the new sign, the empty space where Whitford's name had once hung. Men in neon vests carried lumber into the site. They didn't know the history, and they didn't have to. Their checks would clear. That was enough. Maya rode with me that morning. She leaned forward in the seat, staring at the sign. "So it's really over?" "Over for them," I said. "For us it's just different now." She nodded, quiet. I pulled into a driveway where a young couple was waiting. Their porch steps sagged. I set my tools out, measured the slope, and cut new risers. Simple work, clean and honest. When I finished, the husband shook my hand with both of his, grateful. The wife pressed $20 extra into my palm like she couldn't help herself. I left the steps straighter than the blueprint and felt lighter than I had in years. On the drive back, Maya turned to me. "You're not angry anymore, are you?" I thought about it. The anger was still there, deep in the grain, but it wasn't driving me. "No," I said. "No, it's just memory." December blurred into January. Snow piled on the bungalow roof. Ice crawled along the porch railings. Inside, the house felt warmer than ever. Maya started a certificate program she'd wanted to do years ago. Before Evan, she came home with textbooks under her arm and a tired smile that made me proud in a way I can't put numbers on. One night she left a stack of her books on the kitchen table. I moved them aside to set down my spiral, flipped to a fresh page, and wrote a line that felt like a promise. No loans in love, no signatures without reading twice. No secrets at tables, rules for her, rules for me. On January 5th, the florist called me, a man Sip's voice, cautious. "Sir, I wanted to apologize. That card that was delivered to your home, it was paid for in cash. No sender listed. We don't usually question it." I told him it wasn't his fault. He hesitated, then added, "We only deliver what we are given." but sometimes the message says more about the sender than the receiver. I thanked him and hung up. I kept the card anyway, tucked at the back of the binder, not as a threat, as a reminder. A week later, a holiday card arrived from Renee, a snowy courthouse printed on the front. Inside, in her handwriting, paper beats pedigree. I pinned it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a hammer. Louis stopped by with his son, bringing beer and a grin. "Subs all paid," he said, lifting the bottle. "They sub never forget what you did." "I didn't do it," I said. "The paper did." "Yeah," he laughed, "but you made the paper move." At night, when the house was quiet, I sometimes opened the closet where the binder sat boxed and labeled, "Closed, December 2025. I didn't pull it down. I didn't flip the tabs. I just looked at it, knowing that for once, something broken had been fixed. Something stolen had been returned. Life didn't turn into a movie ending. Bills still came. Jobs still needed doing. But the air in the bungalow had changed. It no longer carried the weight of unsent invoices and unpaid debts. I wrote one more entry in the spiral before closing it for good. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the silence that follows when the fight is finally over. And that silence, that sips what I sips earned. In December, an invitation came in the mail. Cream paper with gold edges. Whitford Family Foundation Annual Gala. Celebrating community builders. The kind of event they use to plaster across society pages. I almost laughed when I read the honoree list. There it was, Richard W., community builder. Maya found me holding the envelope. "You're not going," she said flatly. "I might," I answered. "Not for him. For me." She studied my face, then nodded once. "If you do, Donset, let them see you angry. Let them see you free." On the night of the gala, snowflakes spun in the Chicago wind. I wore my best jacket, not new, not fancy, but pressed. At the hotel ballroom, crystal chandeliers glittered over tables draped in linen. Waiters carried trays of champagne. Name tags glowed under spotlights. I didn't sit with the crowd. I bought 2 seats under Amara's name and slipped into the back row. The program started with speeches about legacy and continuity, words that sounded like excuses in velvet wrapping. When Richard's name was read, applause filled the room. But the stage stayed empty. He wasn't there. Instead, the MC announced, tonight's scholarships for trades apprenticeships were made possible by an anonymous donor. Photos of young carpenters, plumbers, and electricians flashed on the screen, faces lined with hope. The audience clapped again. I knew whose money it was. The settlement funds, redirected under pressure, now dressed up as generosity. Richard had tried to turn his guilt into virtue. He'd bought himself a round of applause with money he'd once sworn I'd never see. The irony tasted sharp. I didn't stand. I didn't clap. I just smiled, because I knew the truth. It wasn't Richard's legacy being built. It was mine. My fight had forced those checks to clear, had turned stolen futures into scholarships. He wanted to erase me, but the proof of me was standing on that stage in steel-toed boots. After the ceremony, I stepped out into the cold night air. The snow crunched underfoot. And I called Maya. She answered on the first ring. "How was it?" she asked. "They called him a community builder," I said. And I watched kids walk across the stage, holding certificates paid for with money he never meant to spend that way. That's Sep's irony enough. She laughed softly, relief in her voice. "So you stayed quiet?" "I stayed visible," I said. I walked down Michigan Avenue, the city glowing with holiday lights, and thought about the long months behind me, the oysters, the insults, the binders, the threats, the stamps. Justice hadn't come in a roar. It came in a whisper, in a transfer slip, in a check finally clearing. At the corner, a young man in a work jacket crossed the street carrying a toolbox. He didn't see me watching, but I nodded anyway. That's who it was all for. Back at the bungalow, I opened the closet one last time. The binder sat boxed, labeled, quiet. I touched the lid and whispered, "Job Sep's done." Then I turned off the light. I didn't climb into their house. I built my own and kept the keys.